Hey guys, it's Catherine Morgan here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Now this channel is here to bring you short but powerful videos to help you to navigate both the emotional side of money, our relationship with money, and the practical steps to help you to reduce financial anxiety and become more financially empowered to deserve wealth, grow wealth, and create wealth. My name's Catherine and I'm a qualified financial planner and international multi-award winning financial coach. That's a bit of a mouthful. So welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button and do leave me a comment below and let me know what was your biggest takeaway from listening to this video. Speak to you soon. I'm really excited today. For those of you that are listening on Facebook this morning, I'm live interview with the wonderful Marina. So Marina is a spiritual intuitive teacher and she specializes in something called Akashic records. Now, I have never heard or come across Akashic records before, and I was introduced to Marina Beech's work by the lovely Jo Solly. So Jo Solly came on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I've actually been working on a one-to-one basis with Jo around numerology, which has been really fascinating for me. And I'll perhaps share some of the impact it's had for me actually as a business owner in a future podcast episode. But Jo introduced me to Marina Beech, and Marina specializes in Akashic records and sort of using the power of spirituality and intuition, looking at our kind of soul identity around how that can impact on our self-worth, how we feel about ourselves, and things that potentially could have happened that will have an impact or leave an imprint on how we make decisions. And as many of you know, I'm very deeply rooted in financial psychology and the reasons why we make decisions, some of the thoughts and beliefs that we have around money and how they can have an impact on how we make decisions. But I've recently been exploring much more of the spiritual side of wealth connection. And I wouldn't necessarily consider myself to be what I would call a woo-woo money mindset expert. But actually, for me, it's not about being woo-woo. It's actually just about understanding your own path and what's led you to the position that you're in today. So I'm really excited to do a deep dive into this topic because it's something that I know nothing about, and it's absolutely fascinating. So a huge welcome to the podcast today, Marina. How are you?
I'm brilliant. Thank you very much for having me here and inviting me on. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here. So feeling really good and ready to share a little bit more about the Akashic records.
Amazing. So you've got 30 years experience in this subject, Marina. Tell us a little bit more about what is Akashic records?
Well, the 30 years definitely comes in the spiritual, and I'd started off with using tarot cards and kind of what we used to call the occult back in the day, and that was always something that interested me. I had no rhyme or reason why, but with the Akashic records, that was actually a much more recent thing that I stumbled across. Like you, had absolutely no idea what they were. Had a bit of a hard time actually trying to say Akashic records. And it was purely by chance that I was watching another Akashic record teacher, and she was actually doing a live that I'd actually responded to a post that she posted on Facebook around us learning a little bit more about our past and perhaps something that was blocking us moving forward in the everyday. So I didn't really know what I was actually answering in terms of question. So I was like, yes, I'd like to know a bit more about my master program, but had no clue what that was. So then she delivered the live, and she kind of told me that my master program, which was held in the Akashic records, which I'll explain what that is in a minute, was alcoholism, which I hadn't really shared with anybody that I was actually battling with an addiction, a psychological addiction to alcohol, not a physical addiction because I've got my drinking under control. And this was literally 3 years ago. But the psychological addiction was there. I couldn't go through a day without actually thinking about, you know, I'd like a drink. How am I going to manage not to have a drink? And it takes an awful lot of energy to really manage that thought process and kind of have that willpower to really kind of hold yourself back. And then the guilt that came with actually then having a drink, you know, afterwards, was just something that I battled with for a number of years. And she told me that I've got this master program of alcoholism. I didn't know her, you know, I'd never met her. And that was just amazing, the fact that she had that information, that she'd received this information, she got this information from this thing called the Akashic Records, and then she cleared it with a pendulum, which from that point onwards, I learned how to use a pendulum. And the switch switched off. It was like something had just turned, and I dropped the whole kind of thinking about alcohol, needing, you know, wanting to have a drink, needing to have a drink. It all switched off in that one moment. And actually, wow. I think it's around this time, it's 3 years, that it was in June that switch got switched off, and I've not wanted alcohol. I've not touched alcohol since. So from that point, it was like, I need to know what the Akashic Records are, and you know, how I can support somebody else with having such an amazing shift and kind of a transformational point in their life. So that's what led me then to kind of learn more about them.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, we often hear stories, don't we, about these like light bulb moments that happen. That must, like, how did that feel for someone to tell you that, who didn't know you?
I was gobsmacked. I was kind of like, well, how does she know that, you know? And she couldn't have known that without picking up on that from a point that she was able to tap into, which is the Akashic Records, and get that information. There was just absolutely no, because I hadn't even revealed that to my husband or my close friends or family, because it was something that I was ashamed of, you know. And so I was kind of just dealing with it on my own. So it was just an amazing point in my life, and that just really turned me onto a new path, and it's really opened up a whole new way of life for me. So it was amazing.
So tell us a little bit more then about when you said that she went into your Akashic Records. What does that entail?
Okay, so first of all, the Akashic Records are like they're like a library of information. So they're energetic, so you can't actually see them. They sit in the 5th dimensional realm. So we're 3rd dimensional, having a very human experience in our physical bodies. 4th dimensionally, you have thoughts and feelings. And then 5th dimensional is where you get to the spiritual realms, and the Akashic Records sit there. And they're basically, as I say, they're like an energetic database that holds information about every single person or soul, and every single lifetime, if you believe in lifetimes, past lives, and every choice and consequence that soul has created in that lifetime from the beginning of creation. So the energetic, the Akashic Records as an energy form are absolutely huge. Information at training. She would have a number of charts. She's using a pendulum. You basically tune in, and using the pendulum to dowse for the answers. That's how you get the information from the Akashic Records. Now, that's not the only way. And the way that I have been kind of working with my clients when I take them into their own Akashic Record is I do it through visualization and meditation, because not everybody uses a pendulum. This takes a little bit of work to kind of get used to using. So using your own mind and your imagination is really the easiest way to get into the Akashic Records, but everybody can do it. That's the really key thing. The Akashic Records now are much more well known about, and that's because as a society across the globe, we are slowly opening up to spirituality and, you know, these things that are available to us, and we're becoming more conscious of our choices, conscious of the planet's choices and kind of what's going on. And having consciousness is really what allows you to really kind of go into your own Akashic records. Way back kind of in the olden days, there wasn't very many highly conscious people around. We were kind of very much living with our, flight and fight, which, we still live with. But we kind of very much, it was about security and safety, looking after your family, staying in tribes, getting food, very, very basic stuff. Whereas now we're not in that position. So we're more able to go into our own Akashic records and access this information, this wealth of information that is available to us. And it's incredibly useful when we want to start to release and heal things from the past that are still holding us back in our business and in our everyday lives, which for me was a program of alcoholism. So it was amazing.
So where do the Akashic records come from? You talk about like in the olden days. Where was it originally established?
Well, they've always been around. They're talked about, that they're globally known. So, every culture kind of has an awareness of the Akashic records. They're talked about in the Bible. They're called the soul records. They're also called the book of life. And as I said, they are mentioned in the Bible as well. So the Akasha is a Sanskrit word, which the Sanskrit language was the first language that was created. And it means ether or space. So they've been around since the kind of beginning of time, since I guess people started to kind of be slightly more conscious. I think that's when and to start to spiritually connect, that's when, the Akashic records were discovered. So they've been around for centuries, absolutely centuries. So they're not a newfangled thing or anything like that. They're very much an old point of knowledge and something that we can access that helps support us and others in our everyday life.
So do you have to be particularly intuitive to be able to access your Akashic records?
No, I don't believe you do. I think what you need to have is an open mind and a willingness to just be, to be open, and I guess to be allowed to be led through into a meditation, and use your imagination. So I think when people start to think about meditation and doing this kind of work, you have to have this kind of really like big visions and be clairvoyant and all of this, and that's just not true. The way that I do my meditations and I do my own healing is just I'm just imagining myself in that situation, and I might sense that, I might feel that, or I might visually see it. But when I take somebody into their own Akashic records, I'm quite graphic, so you can kind of really get a sense for how it feels, and you can picture yourself going into your Akashic records. And there's a couple of specific things that I will do just to make sure that you're going into the right place. But it's really about just immersing yourself, having an open mind, and just allowing yourself to go onto that process and into that journey. And you'll be amazed at kind of what can shift and what change you'll see after you've been into your Akashic record.
And what does that feel like? So when you're going through that process, because I can imagine for some people that they're potentially listening to this thinking, wow, that sounds amazing. And they may have done some meditation work before, or some NLP or rapid transformational therapy. But there'll be other people that will be listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, like what is that going to be like? So talk us through, how does that feel when somebody is guiding you through that? And how would that compare to if you were doing it for yourself?
Okay, well, for me as a teacher, I absolutely love guiding people through. So I don't really immerse myself actually in that meditation, because I'm actually, giving the instruction, as it were. But it's a relaxed process. As I say, I think if you just come with an open mind and just be willing to try and give it a go, I think the idea is that you kind of find the issues, because for me, most of the time I like to lead people into their Akashic record to release something and heal something, to also perhaps unlock a gift or a skill or a talent that they're maybe not using fully in the present lifetime, And I also like them to perhaps ask for guidance. So when I take somebody into their Akashic records, they get to meet their Akashic record keeper. And we have a few of those. So depending on what we're going to the Akashic records for, you'll get to meet a different guide. And you can ask them for guidance, which is very similar if you wanted to start to connect with your higher self or intuition. And our higher self is just a higher version of us that sits on the 5th dimension. And our higher self is somebody that we can connect with to get guidance and information, the same way that we can connect with our Akashic record guide. So it's a relaxed process. The idea is that you come away feeling quite empowered, feeling perhaps healed in some way, and hopefully that you've had some kind of aha or insight whilst you've been in that Akashic record. I usually advise people to drink lots of water afterwards, because you do get some kind of healing and shift when you go in, when I take somebody in anyway. And that just really helps to kind of release anything that is energetically stuck, because at the end of the day, we're all energy, and you're just going into another access point of energy. So yeah, the kind of the general gist is that it's relaxed, and it's you come away feeling good and feeling motivated.
Yeah, amazing. So what kind of challenges do you typically help people with? So if we take in business, for example, what kind of challenges do you see for entrepreneurs that you can help them with by unlocking their Akashic records?
Okay, so the usual challenges with business is client attraction in some way, visibility, self-worth. Self-worth and confidence is actually quite a huge one, whether people are in business or not. I tend to kind of get that as quite a big major one. Lack of self-confidence, self-esteem, and there's always things that come up from their past, which is kind of supporting that feeling, if you know what I mean. So but yeah, visibility, marketing themselves, sales, which all basically comes down to self-confidence again, and not wanting to be seen. So that tends to be the kind of the main things that people would come to me for.
And what are some of the reasons that you hear in terms of what is stopping people from getting visible in their business?
It very much comes down to our choices and in past lives. So people, we've made lots of negative. When I say negative choices, what that means is that they're misaligned. They don't align with us with where we are at the moment, where we want to kind of move forward to, and the choices of the past just misalign with that. And when we make a misaligned choice, it kind of creates an energy, and it's that energy that we still see in our life today that we attract in some way that is holding us back. So for instance, if I decided to join a religious order, which, we tended to join a lot of religious orders in the past, and we might have joined that religious order because we wanted to atone for something that we'd done previously, so atone for our sins, or maybe we wanted to devote ourselves to God and to kind of heal and serve people. Or we might have also joined the religious order for safety and security, because we might have, been disowned by our family, whatever the reasons are. And usually when we join a religious order, what we're agreeing to then is to hand over our spiritual authority to somebody that we perceive as being God. And that would be usually the religious leader that was in that organisation. And we would make a vow, or we would make several vows. And there's different types of vows that have different energies. And so when we make a vow, we're kind of handing over our spiritual authority, and it might then be that it has an energy of poverty, because we're agreeing that any money that we make, we're going to give to the church, or that we're going to live a very austere lifestyle and not kind of feel worthy of being able to have anything of our own, because we have to give everything to the church. So we have these different types of vows, which if we have a vow of poverty, how that shows up today then is perhaps we really have issues with a lack mindset, we have this scarcity or poverty consciousness that we buy into. Or it might be that, you know, we're really good at making money and we could make millions, but we can't save it. We can't hold on to it. And that's because we have this vow of poverty that we've taken, we've agreed, we've made a promise, there's been a ritual that's attached to that in a past lifetime, and that is still affecting us. So, you know, it's a form of contract. We've made an exchange of energy with somebody. It's not been broken and it's still affecting us today. So it's fascinating that how our choices of the past can still be affecting us today.
That's so interesting. Earlier in series 5 of the podcast, I was talking about so I'm in a financial psychology mastermind in the US, and the two guys that run that mastermind is Ted and Brad Klontz, who are financial psychologists, and they have an exercise called the money atom exercise, and it's where you essentially go back into your family history and you draw visually with shapes, triangles and circles and squares, different people's representations in your family. And maybe it was the male male people in your life that brought in the wealth into the family, and maybe it was the female figures in your family that maybe spent the wealth, or it could have been the opposite. And what's interesting for me there is that when you talk about that scarcity mindset or that kind of poverty vow, is that we're all in a kind of little comfort zone, aren't we? And if we're used to experiencing receiving money or receiving wealth, then it becomes comfortable and familiar to us. But if we're not used to that and we're suddenly trying to move from a place of debt or scarcity around money to abundance and wealth creation, it's unfamiliar to our brain as well. Our brain doesn't even recognize what that is. So that's really interesting that you touched upon how that scarcity mindset can keep us stuck, and particularly from a business perspective can keep us stuck in undercharging for our services in lots of different ways. So I guess the Akashic Records then is another extension then of going back even further. So going right back into maybe past lives and how some of those vows that we've taken can affect the decisions that we're making today. That's really
absolutely, yeah. And when I do my work, I'm literally going in for blocks and restrictions when I'm working on a one-to-one basis. So it's very much about what's blocking the client now, and I kind of very much work with a 6-month intention. So what it is they would really like to actively intend and work on, and that's the blocks and restrictions that I then pick up on. Usually we look at about 3 lifetimes worth of blocks and restrictions, and they can be things like contracts, vows. We can have bargains. We can have compassionate connections. There's just so many different things. We have implants, and implants are quite interesting because what they are, they're coping mechanisms. So what we do is we make a choice, and it's usually joining an organization again. We realize that they're corrupt in some way, but we're still getting something out of being in there. So what we do is we create an implant as a coping mechanism to kind of talk us, kind of allowing us to still stay in that organization or make a negative choice even though it feels wrong. And that then creates a program that will still affect us today. There's just so much that is held within the Akashic Records that you can dive into and find when you're kind of led in the right way, which it's incredible because we can heal this energetically, which is what I then do. But then we have to back that up with physical new choices. And when you touched on about us being in our comfort zone, and it's kind of being a challenge to kind of move, as I say, you know, shifting that mindset to kind of receiving and being abundant and feeling wealthy and having this really beautiful high self-worth, that is very uncomfortable. But it takes that physical change to, in whatever form that we would do. So it might be treating yourself to, you know, some really beautiful flowers or buying indulgent chocolates or whatever to feel worthy. It needs to be supported by physical action as well. I'm very much kind of, you know, it's great that we can do this energy work, but we have to bring it back to the 3rd dimensional human experience to actually physically to see the transformation as well.
Yeah, I like that practical element of it. I guess being the financial planner in me, I'm kind of like, well, so what's the practical steps?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm all about practical as well.
And I love that because a lot of women that I work with as well, particularly in business, although also those people who are employees, is we do have a lot of guilt and shame and judgment attached to money. And when that guilt can get so strong, then often we don't feel comfortable spending on ourselves. And one of the practical tips I always talk about is creating yourself a treat pot, like literally creating a physical separate savings account, or if you're using the likes of Starling Bank or Monzo, you can create a little pot for yourself. But that's really important, because then from a mental accounting perspective, we've actually parked that money with a label on it of that is my treat pot. Therefore, I'm not going to have any guilt or shame associated with that pot. Are there any other practical tips that you would give people, Marina, for those ladies perhaps that are feeling particularly lacking in self-worth and want to increase their own confidence?
I would really try and connect with, what it is where is this self-worth coming from? What has happened? There will be something that they probably can remember that has allowed them to feel kind of a little bit shame and kind of this low self-worth. And it's really connecting with that. And for me, I would recommend journaling. So definitely kind of start to think, well, what does self-worth mean to me? How would I feel if what does self-worth feel like if I felt absolutely 100% deserving of everything that I ever wanted in my whole life? How does that feel? Where do you feel that in your body? Because I think making that connection with an emotion is going to be kind of a lot stronger than just kind of thinking about it. And then it's, if there's any specific incidents or occasions or events that have happened in your life, and they might be early on, you might not remember them, but I think it's worth going there just to see if you can identify what triggered this low self-worth. And usually it might be that there was an odd comment from somebody, and it might have been a flippant comment, but we've stored that. And over time, there might have been a few more comments or other things that we've started to then build up in our head. And then it creates this like low self-worth. But I think you have to break it down and identify where you can remember where that comes from. And then maybe just really see it for what it is. If you can kind of see it from a third position. So emotionally detaching yourself from that, and kind of reviewing it from a more kind of discerning, aspect or perspective. So I did hear a really good way of doing this. If you're still getting triggered by a particular event or person or relationship or something that's gone on, and if it connects to self-worth, perfect. What you can do is you place that event or that person in a cardboard box. And then what you do is you take a few steps back and just visualize yourself stepping back. And then you kind of like, quite far back. But then you get yourself into a lift. Imagine yourself going, say, 10, 20 stories high. Get out of the lift and look down and just see that box as a tiny little point, a little speck on the floor. Then from that point, have a look at that situation, because that's just a way of emotionally detaching and then just reviewing how you feel about that situation or that person or whatever that might be that links to that self-worth. And see then if you can then ask yourself some questions about that. Maybe look at it from a different viewpoint, because that's what you've done. You've physically taken yourself away and looking at it from a different perspective. And that might just then allow you to maybe get more insight or guidance around it. Or it might be just that you can then let it go. Just, I'm done with this. I'm going to let it go. And usually what I recommend is for my clients to maybe do a healing meditation, a forgiveness meditation, usually not necessarily for the other person, but maybe for ourselves, just to forgive ourselves for hanging on to this energy for so long, this trigger, and now we're going to let it go. And it's those types of things that I feel that really do help build up the self-confidence and the self-worth. Affirmations are really good as well. Some people like to use affirmations.
Yeah, amazing. And I know that for the podcast listeners, you're going to be giving away a free meditation track that people can download. So we'll pop a link to that in the show notes. What I loved about that exercise you just talked through with the box and the kind of a helicopter view almost, and looking down on something, that's something that's done through neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. And also one of the exercises that I relate to wealth creation with that kind of approach is about doing a helicopter view of your finances. Excuse me, because sometimes it can feel too difficult to even to open bank statements sometimes, and feel that wealth deservingness, I guess, of even being able to open your bank account without feeling shame or guilt or judgment. And one of the exercises I did in my 5-day challenge actually last year was around this helicopter view of your wealth. So you can literally just grab a piece of paper and start thinking about, what do you already have an abundance of? So you could bring some gratitude to wealth creation. So things like, the house that you're living in, whether that's rented or owned, the TV that you watch every evening, the stereo systems that you have that enable you to listen to music, the bathtub that you enjoy some nice hot bubble bath in, just bringing some gratitude to things that you own can really help assist with that moving from scarcity to abundance. And I love the way, Marina, you were talking about where you take that helicopter view. It can actually help to detach yourself from the emotions.
Yeah, that's a really big part of it, because when self-worth is so emotive, we give ourselves a real hard time. And I think that for me, it's definitely identifying where it's come from, and then from that point you can really start to, as I say, do the detachment, and then start to heal it and move forward from it.
Amazing. Well, that's been so interesting, Marina. And I know that you specifically are working with entrepreneurs in helping them to access those Akashic records to then help them to transform their wealth creation in their business. Can you tell us a little bit about how you work with clients? And I know you've got a program coming up. Could you tell people a little bit about how they can find out more about that and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook, and I'm sure Catherine will provide all the links. But generally, I work with my clients at the moment one-to-one. I do everything in the Akashic records. I do things through tarot cards, which is more of a forecast. But most of my work is actually working with people's past lives and their blocks and restrictions. So that's a session called soul realignment. And the beauty of that particular session is that the client gets to learn more about their soul gifts and their divine gifts and their characteristics and talents, and also the blocks that are kind of holding them back. And the reason that that's kind of really key is that it's good to understand how we've been created at soul level, because we all have these divine gifts. And if we're not kind of really exploring those divine gifts, if we're not really aligning to our divine gifts and how we've been created, then it puts us in lack, and we'll attract lack and everything that we don't really want in our lives. So it really does open up abundance and that kind of flow and opportunity and everything that we're kind of really striving for, I guess. So having that information is really, really helpful, but then also having those blocks cleared to those intentions that you want to manifest and create is super helpful. So that's the soul realignment. And I do that in a number of ways. I'll do a one-off session, or I do a 3-month program. And then the Business Akashic Record program is something that's launching in September, which I'm really excited about. And this is going to be more of a group program. It'll be my first one. And it is specifically for entrepreneurs who basically want to increase client attraction. So it's going to be over a number of weeks. I'm going to kind of support you going into your own Akashic record. You're going to learn about your divine gift, because I think, as I say, that needs to be that information needs to be shared, but also how that person can show up in their business using their divine gift to, the best that they can.
Amazing.
But then I'm also going to take you through self-worth. So there's going to be a huge section on self-worth, which affects your confidence, your self-esteem, your visibility. There is going to be a whole thing about marketing and sales from an energetic point of view. And I'm also going to be looking at money blocks, because that's obviously a huge topic.
Amazing.
entrepreneurs, especially as business entrepreneurs, we have to learn how to manage our energy better so we can show up in the way that we want to and serve our clients in the way that we want to. So, I'm going to be doing quite a lot around that as well. So there's lots of information in that particular program, which I'm really excited about.
Great. Well, thank you so much for allowing us to interview you today, Marina. Thank you so much for coming on the In Her Financial Shoes podcast. And we'll make sure we pop all your links and things into the podcast show notes. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to understand more about the Akashic records. And so thanks so much for your time today, Marina.
Oh, thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do me a big favor and leave me a comment below this video and let me know, what was your one biggest takeaway? What are you going to do differently as a result of watching today's video? Now, you can go ahead and check out more free resources available to you at the website, which is themoneypanel.co.uk, or please feel free to tune into our weekly podcast on all of the typical podcast channels. That's In Her Financial Shoes. And remember, small steps, big wins. Let's go.